dead. George W. Bush had to deal with this. Barack Obama had to deal with this repeatedly. Joe Biden had to deal with this. They didn't scream and yell and say we weren't going to listen to federal district court judges.
Supreme Court blocked me from relieving student debt, but they didn't stop me. So far, I've relieved student debt for nearly 5 million Americans. A significant number are black borrowers.
I'm going to make it my goal that we never forget what Joe Scarborough said. Anytime he says something, I'm playing that video, those videos over and over. Because how can he switch like this and expect everybody is as dumb as his wife?
Yeah, well,
You could just see that was going to be the reason, because there were no reasons before the debate.
No.
Sorry, Joe. Saying the debate was like a shocking reason for Biden's downfall is like saying, oh, I didn't know Hunter Biden was a problem until I saw his artwork.
In a moment that sent shockwaves through late-night political commentary, a blatant display of dishonesty unfolded when a prominent television host, without an ounce of shame or integrity, looked directly into the camera and delivered a series of bold-faced lies to his unsuspecting audience. The deception wasn't subtle, it was deliberate, calculated, and aimed at misleading the very people who trusted him for insight and truth. But just when it seemed like the misinformation would go unchallenged, Greg Gutfeld stepped in with an intensity and clarity that few had ever seen from him before. With razor-sharp analysis and an unfiltered sense of righteous indignation, Gutfeld dismantled every single falsehood with surgical precision. He didn't just refute the lies, he exposed the manipulative tactics behind them, peeling back the layers of distortion that had been so confidently presented as fact. What made the moment even more powerful was the sheer rawness of Gutfeld's response. This wasn't a rehearsed monologue or a pre-written script. It was a spontaneous eruption of truth from a man fed up with the constant gaslighting and media spin. His voice carried not just facts, but frustration, the kind that had clearly been building over time, watching dishonesty become normalized in mainstream political discourse. The takedown wasn't just about calling out one man, it was a direct assault on the broader culture of arrogance and moral superiority that has taken root in some corners of media. Watching someone so steeped in self-righteousness finally get humbled in front of a national audience wasn't just eye-opening, it was deeply satisfying. For viewers who've grown tired of being lied to, who crave transparency and accountability, Gutfeld's fiery rebuttal served as a cathartic release, a rare moment when truth cut through the noise and landed with force. And in that moment, it became crystal clear, no matter how loud the lies, they can't stand up to the truth when someone's brave enough to speak it without fear.
Scarborough is talking with the authors of a new book that details just how Biden really was, how bad he was. And Scarborough acts as if he knew it the whole time. But it wasn't that long ago when Scarborough said this about the commander in coma.
He's cogent, but I undersold him when I said he was cogent. He's far beyond cogent. In fact, I think he's better than he's ever been. Intellectually, analytically.
Cogent? I think he meant pungent. Keep yakking, you grifter.
Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second. And I've known him for years. The Brzezinskis have known him for 50 years. If it weren't the truth, I wouldn't say it.
Of course it wasn't the truth, you bozo. Which is why you said it. This guy has always been more full of than a cage full of chimps mainlining Metamucil. Here he is in 2023.
And trusting Joe Scarborough is like trusting a tree with no roots. Sooner or later, both are destined to come crashing down the moment a strong wind of truth blows their way. It's not just a matter of political disagreement anymore. It's about credibility, consistency, and connection to reality. Scarborough, once seen by some as a serious voice in mainstream media, has now become a caricature of his former self, parroting the same outdated narratives he was peddling back in 2023. What's truly baffling is that there's still a segment of the audience nodding along in agreement, as if nothing has changed, ignoring the fact that the political landscape has shifted, facts have surfaced, and trust in establishment punditry is at an all-time low. His commentary, which once might have sparked thoughtful debate, now feels like a rerun of a show that everyone else stopped watching seasons ago. The tragic comedy of it all is that while he likely sees himself as a sharp, informed voice of reason, what actually comes across is more akin to a late-night sketch gone rogue, unintentionally hilarious, painfully repetitive, and detached from the very issues he claims to understand. The punchlines fall flat, not because they lack delivery, but because the audience has grown tired of watching someone pretend to make sense while refusing to evolve with the times. In a media era demanding authenticity, critical thought, and a willingness to adapt, Joe Scarborough has instead clung to a script that no longer resonates, making him less a commentator and more a relic, shouting into the void as the world moves on.
Wake me up when I'm asleep at 8:30 at night, because Meek and I, of course, wake up at 4:30 in the morning. And I'll just go, hello? Yes, sir?
Yeah.
And about an hour later, he will aggressively and very effectively give me point by point by point about how my op-ed was flawed.
First of all, what kind of loser has to get up at 4:30 in the morning? So he relays an anecdote about Biden calling him up to talk politics. He left out the part that Biden thought he was talking to Amelia Earhart. But does anybody really believe that story, seriously? Biden didn't have the mental capability to dissect his own pork chop for dinner, let alone dissect a Joe Scarborough op-ed. He couldn't debate a speak and spell, which is why they told him the speak and spell was the nuclear football. And Scarborough actually wanted us to believe Joe was still awake at 8:30 at night. By then, he was already in his cryogenic chamber, dreaming about his uncle getting eaten by cannibals, overcoming oil cancer, and Corn Pop's love for hairy legs. Remember this stinky pile of crap from February 2024 after special counsel Robert Hur declined to pursue criminal charges against Biden? Hur said Biden willfully possessed classified docs, but it was okay because he's an old man with a bad memory. Well, the Dems exploded with rage at this obvious truth, and this hack led the attack.
There's so many people that immediately heard these random conclusions, irrelevant conclusions, who, first of all, wondered why in the world he would put that in a report, his neurological assessment of Joe Biden. Why in the world would the Justice Department allow that dicta to be in there? It's gratuitous. Well, and he knows it's gratuitous, and it was bad faith.
Of course.
And just like that, the illusion shattered. Joe Biden, once propped up as the steady hand, the seasoned leader, was exposed as nothing more than a carefully managed facade. His recent statements, instead of projecting strength, only served as weak attempts at damage control, revealing a leadership style that's reactive rather than proactive. It's as if his entire presidency is held together not by conviction, but by a team of handlers scrambling to manage the fallout of every gaffe and contradiction. And yet, the same people who spent years selling him as the most fit, sharp, and mentally agile president now seem to be walking back their own narrative, subtly, strategically, as if we wouldn't notice. But we do. This isn't about political opposition anymore. It's about credibility, consistency, and the dangerous consequences of elevating someone who was never truly ready to lead. The Democrats, who once prided themselves on moral high ground and unwavering principles, have become experts in narrative manipulation. Their positions shift like the wind. What was once a strength yesterday is a liability today, and what they condemned years ago, they now embrace if it suits their agenda. It's a performance, a polished routine of public relations and selective memory, all designed to protect power at the cost of truth. This is not governance, it's storytelling, constantly rewritten to suit the political season. And while the headlines may change, one thing remains the same: their willingness to sacrifice clarity, stability, and even honesty for the sake of preserving a crumbling image.
My son, born in 1991, has a slight form of autism called Asperger's. But it seems, and again, when I was practicing law, and also when I was in Congress, parents would constantly come to me, and they'd bring me videotapes of their children, and they were all around the age of my son or younger.
The generation...
Something happened in 1989.
Exactly. What happened was the vaccine schedule was increased. We went up from receiving about 10 vaccines in our generation to these kids received 24 vaccines. And they all had this thimerosal and this mercury, and nobody bothered to do an analysis of what the cumulative impact of all that mercury was doing to kids. As it turns out, we are injecting our children with 400 times the amount of mercury that FDA or EPA considers safe. A child on his first day that he's born is injected with a hepatitis B shot. Under EPA guidelines, he would have to be 275 pounds to safely absorb that shot.
And yet we're just constantly pumping our kids with these vaccines.
Right, and what happened was that in 1988, 1 in every 2,500 American children had autism. Today, 1 in every 166 children have autism, and plus 1 in 6 children have other kinds of learning disorders, other kinds of neurological disorders, speech delay, language disorders, ADD, hyperactivity, that all seem to be connected, the science shows are all connected to autism.
You know, Bobby, what we've always found, you and I could debate 1,000 different issues, whether it's Terry Schiavo or the environment. I think would agree on the environment. But in this case, you've got the federal government coming in saying, well, there's no good science. And of course, in politics, science always gets diluted. Why hasn't the federal government stepped up and worked more? Because listen, Bobby, I can't prove it tonight. You can't prove it. But intuitively, you look at the spike, you look at what happened with the thimerosal, there is no doubt in my mind, maybe it's 2 years from now, maybe it's 5 years from now, maybe it's 10 years from now, we're going to find out that the thimerosal causes, in my opinion, autism.
You know what? The science...
In a political landscape increasingly defined by contradictions and selective outrage, the recent developments surrounding law enforcement, high-profile prosecutions, and the evolving mission of the FBI have stirred intense public debate. Former FBI Special Agent Nicole Parker shed light on what she sees as a deeply troubling shift within the Bureau, once an institution grounded in justice and law, now allegedly consumed by political agendas and social narratives that stray far. Was from its foundational mission, under the leadership of FBI Director Kash Patel and Attorney General Pam Bondi, a renewed effort is underway to restore that original mission. Patel's formation of a specialized task force to investigate recent acts of violence shows a clear pivot toward accountability, targeting not just the foot soldiers involved in chaos, but the masterminds funding and orchestrating it behind the scenes. Parker emphasized the FBI's approach: follow the money. Bank records, financial transactions, and digital trails do not lie. And if these violent events are indeed being bankrolled, the new leadership is determined to expose the truth, no matter how powerful the players involved may be. Meanwhile, in a bold legal move, Attorney General Pam Bondi announced the federal government will seek the death penalty against Luigi Mangione for the premeditated assassination of Brian Thompson, a father of 2 young children. This landmark decision, the first of its kind in Manhattan in 70 years, stands in sharp contrast to President Joe Biden's controversial commutation of 37 federal death row sentences, an act that, despite being framed as a humanitarian gesture, has been widely criticized by both sides of the political spectrum as a betrayal to the victims' families. Bondi's firm stance signals a clear message: justice will be served and violent criminals will no longer be shielded by political correctness or bureaucratic leniency. Parker also recounted how the FBI's current priorities have become so misaligned that they refuse to fund the funeral services of fallen agents like Special Agent Laura Schwarzenberger and Daniel Alfin, heroes who died in the line of duty protecting children from predators. At the same time, resources are being poured into low-level, non-violent investigations, reflecting a disturbing misallocation of focus and funding. She expressed deep frustration over the FBI's embrace of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion campaigns while sidelining its core responsibilities, calling it a glaring example of fraud, waste, and abuse. And while all this unfolds, in the realm of political commentary, media figures like Joe Scarborough continue to act as if they're taking a moral high ground, recycling the same tired talking points and pretending to care. Yet the moment someone like RFK Jr. echoes those exact sentiments without changing a word, the very same Democrats who once applauded those views explode with outrage. The irony is palpable. It's almost poetic, watching how swiftly they abandon their own words, how quickly they rewrite history to suit their narrative. But here's the truth they keep forgetting. The internet never forgets. Every contradiction, every flip-flop, every double standard is preserved in the digital records for all to see. And while they may continue playing their political games, more and more people are starting to wake up. The facade is cracking, the truth is surfacing, and in this era of transparency and digital memory, no amount of spin can bury reality forever. The tide is turning, and those who underestimated the collective awareness of the people are about to face a reckoning.
Feet of a polygraph machine, it would burst into flames. But Scarborough couldn't afford to be honest with his audience because the Dems had a big bad orange man breathing down their necks. So he had to deny Biden's physical and mental decline, which the whole world saw every day. He had to blurt out hostile, fidgety or they wouldn't give him the pills that keep him from turning into a werewolf. His entire grift was so that he could be the last person MSNBC lays off. I mean, it's not like his night job as a butthead impersonator would cover his monthly nut. But now in 2025, when he thinks it's safe, Scarborough has seen the light.
I remember talking to a reporter 3 days before the before the debate, and we were talking about how Biden was starting to fall behind in Minnesota, that Virginia was getting really tight, uncomfortably tight, and Democrats were afraid Biden would even lose New Hampshire. We both said to each other, the funny thing is, like, no matter how Biden does in this debate, people are going to